the psychological thrill of torturing NPCs in video games. In the virtual worlds of modern gaming, players often encounter opportunities to exert control over non-playable characters, NPCs. While some may choose benevolence or neutrality, a significant number are drawn to darker behaviors, including tormenting or killing NPCs without consequence. This phenomenon raises compelling psychological questions about agency, morality, and emotional detachment in digital spaces. The thrill of torturing NPCs seems to tap into aspects of human curiosity and suppressed impulses, offering a sandbox where taboo actions can unfold without real-world repercussions. At the core of this thrill lies the illusion of consequence-free power. Unlike interactions with real people, NPCs are coded entities lacking consciousness, which allows players to project dominance without guilt. In open-world or sandbox games where morality is optional, players often test the boundaries of their freedom, sometimes escalating to gratuitous violence. The thrill here stems from the sudden shift in ethical framing, from social norms to a self-contained universe where the player is God, judge, and executioner. This power dynamic unlocks a kind of cathartic release, especially in individuals curious about dark behavior in a safe, simulated environment. The role of game design also plays a significant part in this dynamic. Developers often imbue NPCs with enough realism to evoke emotional responses, lifelike voices, routines, or even apparent emotions, yet they remain ultimately disposable. This blend of believability and disposability creates a strange duality. Players can suspend disbelief enough to feel immersed, yet not enough to feel morally accountable. Games like Grand Theft Auto, Skyrim, or Red Dead Redemption 2 give players nearly complete control over their environments, encouraging spontaneous actions that can include tormenting NPCs for amusement, experimentation, or rebellion against game-imposed order. Another facet of the thrill comes from subverting narrative expectations. NPCs are typically passive fixtures or quest givers, but when a player turns on them, it disrupts the expected flow of the game. This subversion can evoke a sense of transgression, a pleasure derived not from sadism per se, but from breaking the unwritten rules of storytelling. The forbidden nature of harming these characters, who are often designed to be helpful or benign, enhances the psychological impact. It becomes an act of creative anarchy, a form of unstructured role-playing where players author their own narratives, even if those narratives are steeped in cruelty. The anonymity and detachment provided by digital avatars also embolden players. Much like how online anonymity can fuel toxic behavior in forums or comment sections, video game avatars allow players to disassociate from their real identities. The player is no longer themselves but a conduit acting through a pixelated shell. This dissociation dulls empathy and heightens experimentation. Torturing NPCs becomes an exercise in simulated sociopathy, one that tests the boundaries of the player's morality while simultaneously entertaining them with its absurdity or grotesqueness. Some players are driven not by cruelty but by curiosity. They might wonder how the game will react, whether the AI will retaliate, whether other characters will respond, or whether the world will change in meaningful ways. This experimentation is less about sadism and more about probing the limits of the simulation. In many cases, torturing NPCs is simply a way to push the system to its edge, searching for glitches, Easter eggs, or moral feedback loops. This kind of behavior suggests that the thrill is as much intellectual as it is emotional. Moreover, the act can serve as a release valve for real-world frustrations. Games function as emotional playgrounds where suppressed feelings can be expressed. A player stressed from work, social tension, or emotional repression might find symbolic satisfaction in dominating a powerless virtual character. It's not that the player truly wants to harm others in reality, but rather that the game allows them to exorcise internal tensions through a harmless outlet. Torturing NPCs in this context becomes less about violence and more about venting, with the virtual realm acting as a pressure chamber for human emotion. That said, not all who engage in this behavior are devoid of guilt or reflection. Many players feel momentary discomfort after mistreating realistic NPCs, especially those that mirror human vulnerability. Games that integrate morality systems, such as Mass Effect or The Witcher, can trigger emotional consequences, reminding players of their actions and offering redemption or condemnation. This moral mirroring can either intensify the thrill of getting away with it, or prompt ethical introspection. Either way, it deepens the psychological layers of the act and ties it more closely to the player's real-life value system. Interestingly, some players even create entire roleplay personas around their actions, deliberately adopting villainous roles to explore different moral paths. torturing NPCs is then less about personal thrill and more about narrative immersion. In such cases, the player uses cruelty as a storytelling device, embodying a character who acts out certain dark themes. This adds nuance to the psychological analysis. What appears on the surface as sadism may actually be complex, reflective play. Despite the disturbing nature of the topic, it is essential to distinguish between simulated behavior and real intent. Studies generally show no direct correlation between in-game violence and real-world aggression, suggesting that the psychological thrill of torturing NPCs remains confined to the virtual. If anything, it highlights how flexible human morality can become when shifted into hypothetical, consequence-free environments. The very fact that players often feel conflicted or curious about these actions reinforces the idea that games are uniquely potent spaces for psychological exploration. In conclusion, the thrill of torturing NPCs in video games is a multifaceted phenomenon rooted in power, curiosity, narrative subversion, and emotional release. While disturbing at first glance, this behavior often reveals more about the structure of games and the flexibility of human imagination than about the moral failings of players. As digital worlds grow more complex, the ways in which we interact with their denizens will continue to offer insight into the deepest corners of our psychology, both light and dark.